Well, good morning, everybody. I am Rev Bonnie, and I am the community spiritual leader here at the center, and it feels so good to say that. So good morning.
Good morning.
This month, as Edie already mentioned, we are focusing on becoming channels of change and peace. And I know we've heard Peggy, when she speaks, talk about getting that cosmic download. And so when I come up with topics for the month, it feels kind of like that cosmic download. I just sort of go with what comes out. And then several months later, when it's time to address that topic, I'm like, wow, where did this come from? The idea of change and peace in one sentence, that really struck me. Because most of my life, change has meant chaos or disruption, or at least something that I tried to avoid. Now, maybe some of you are evolved enough that you love change, but I'm still getting there. And what happened when I thought about change and peace in the same sentence is I realized that my thinking needed to change. That I had been always equating change with something uncomfortable. And I'm going to start focusing on, and I focused on throughout this entire talk and putting it together, this idea that change and peace can be synonymous. That change can bring about peace, that it can result in peace. So at this time, is there anything in your life that you can think of that was a change that created peace? Yeah. Is there anything that you could change that would create peace? I know for the board, when they discovered that I could stay on and they didn't have to candidate, that was a change that created peace for them. And I realized for me, it was also a change for peace because I got to just keep doing what I love doing. And so this has been an amazing realization for me that those two terms can come in the same place. Now, this time of year, like we just heard, I'm sure many of us knew the words that Mary Lynn was playing. The idea of what is in what Ernest Holmes would call race consciousness all around us is more about tradition. And traditions are not necessarily conducive to change. And part of what we're getting out of those traditions is this idea of peace on earth. It's happy, everything's great. And yet inside, not all of us are experiencing that. Inside, some of us are struggling at this time of the year. Sometimes this isn't the most joyous season, and yet that's what we're being told is supposed to be happening all around us. So what exactly are we celebrating with all these different traditions at this time of year that are bringing us into this celebratory, supposedly happy, joyful, peaceful mood? I think most traditions are celebrating light. Some form of light. So again, Mary Lynn is just tuned into spirit because she had us say that we are the light and joy this morning. So most things are celebrating, most of these traditions are celebrating the light and bringing the return of the light at the solstice season, but also bringing the light into the world in a numerous different ways, depending on the tradition that's taking place at this time of year. So I wanted to share with you from Marianne Williamson's Illuminata, and thank you, Kathleen. She loaned me this book. She talks about the illumination of the mind. Illumination is light in the mind, the Word made flesh. And for those who are familiar with the Christian tradition, at Christmas time, we often hear Jesus referred to as the Word made flesh. The integration of heaven and earth. It is an abstract principle dressed in human cloth. The light-filled explosion that occurs when the mind embraces its source. Illumination is not of this world. It lifts us above the lies of the world by helping us to detach from them. Illumination is both our source and our destiny. The reason we came here and the reason we stay. We are here to achieve an uplifted mode of being. We are meant to return to the living light, which casts out the darkness of our mental miscreations. Light cracked open the closed, arrogant mind. Illumination is a deepening sense of the sacred. It is the spiritual laser that cuts through the blocks to our liberation. Liberation or breaking through is actually a movement into ourselves, the door to the next phase of our evolutionary journey. So what happens then when we reconnect with our source? When we illumine our mind, when we bring that light into our mind, when we look within? Again, as I said, right now, when we have all this tradition going on around us, sometimes what we find in there is this comparison between what's being showed to us as what we're supposed to look like, all the happy Hallmark families that get along and sit around the table, and if there's any conflict, they resolve it within an hour to an hour and a half. And then they're happy eating together, there's plenty of food. And so that's what we start comparing ourselves to. And sometimes our reality isn't that. In fact, what I've found in the so-called real world is often conflict has become part of the tradition. Aren't there some families that just always get together and have the same conflict every time they get together? They come up with the same things to get frustrated with each other about or whatever. So when we look within, I think often what we find in there is a kid that's starting to get really unhappy at this time of year. There's the part of us that goes back into our childhood that we don't even consciously realize we're doing and is responding to either things that have happened or didn't happen in our childhood. And we start to feel that sadness and loneliness because all of this stuff around us is telling us we should be feeling something different than what we are at that time. So just take a moment right now and go within and think about your childhood experience at this time of year. How did your family celebrate? Some of you might come out of different traditions. So what was your family doing at this time of year? What memories come up for you? Are they positive and warm? And some of them could be. And sometimes those positive and warm ones can then create some sense of melancholy or longing for that experience again. Maybe you having that again. Some of those memories could be a bit challenging. Sometimes, I know in my experience, I was thinking, well, I don't do it the way other families do it. Our family didn't do the traditional Christmas. And so it made me feel different at this time of year. Okay, so bring your awareness back here. I think it's time that we apply principle then to some of those memories, because one of the things we realized we've been working in the practitioner class is that sometimes that inner stuff is still controlling what's going on today. So as you are able, please rise. If you can't stand, it's all right. Just use your hands instead of your feet. Are you ready? You put your right foot in, you put your right foot out, you put your right foot in, and you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey, and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about. Your hand, you put your right hand in, you put your right hand out, you put your right hand in, and you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey, and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about. Yee-haw! Now, how do you feel about those memories? How are you feeling now? Good. Because I think within all of us, that child wants to play. That child is in there wanting to cut loose and come out. And then when it's hurting, what ends up happening is that what I've discovered, especially as we looked at this in the practitioner class. Now you think by practitioner class, you've taken all these other classes, it's over, right? You've reached the pinnacle. And yet there's still parts of us that have that little child in there that's getting real grumpy and unhappy at this time of year. And all it wants to do is play. And what I realized is a lot of us are adults, and a lot of areas in our life we're still being run by really unhappy kids. Now, does that make a lot of sense? No, it doesn't, I don't think. So as we look then within, as we illumine our mind, as we illumine our inner soul at this time of year, what is lit up? What are we starting to see? We're seeing that kid in there. We're seeing that part of us that just wants to play. Now, if you're like me, play hasn't come easily, and I didn't play easily even as a kid. I was given a lot of messages about it. I was sort of directed in channels that weren't really play, like the way kids usually play. I was told things like, quit playing around. I was told, let's see, how does that one go? Work before play makes you happy and gay. Play before work turns you into a jerk. Anyone heard that? That's what I heard. Work was valued. Work and focus was definitely valued above play. And so bringing that piece of play into this service this morning and doing the hokey pokey was a challenge. I struggled with, okay, do we do this? Because first of all, of course, I didn't want to look like a jerk. And second of all, I didn't want to be perceived as not taking the Sunday celebration seriously enough. You know, this is supposed to be a serious time. I didn't want to feel like I was mocking the service, and I didn't want to offend anybody that, like me, has a hard time playing. And the other thing that's been happening this week, and you might have noticed these flowers. A good friend of mine passed away Monday, and we had a service for her this weekend. And so at the same time that I was preparing this talk, and this had been coming through now for about a month, I was also preparing for her service. And I was going between this joyful play and feeling really sad and thinking, you know, is this disrespectful to her? And many of you here knew her, and I started to finally realize she was playful. She loved to play. She wanted a good game night, a good movie night. So to talk about and think about play this week was a perfect way to honor her. These, like I said, these flowers are from her memorial. They gifted them to us. And so what I have come to realize is that, like in Thomas More's book, Care of the Soul, which is one of the books we are reading in the practitioner class, our soul, that part of us that Marianne Williamson was talking about, that deeper inner part of us, gets cared for in sort of out of the ordinary ways. It gets cared for through symbolism, through those archetypes that we play with in the world, and through play itself. So again, I want us to think a little bit more about how it is we value play or not value it. Think of the term, I'm just playing around. What does that say about what you're doing? If you say, I'm just playing around, it's kind of brings it to a lower than more serious level. And I thought about, because I've been watching musicians here lately, we had Howling Coyote Friday. I watched Mary Lynn practice the piano for her masters. I see Brenda practicing singing and drums, and Randy's up here drumming. And they practice and practice and practice. And when they perform, we still say they're playing the piano and they're playing the drums. We don't say they're working that piano and they're working that drum or they're working their voice. And I don't think many people go into the field of music to make a lot of money. Am I correct? So our society looks at something as amazing and that takes as much work as music and continues to call it play. On some level, it's devaluing what it is that's happening there. Another thing I noticed about play and that idea of playing around is we have some examples within our own congregation, and Erica's not here this morning, but she does know I'm talking about her. On Facebook, she posted a beautiful picture of an old chair that she was painting a picture on the seat of. And she said, I'm not an artist and I'm not a painter, I'm just playing around. And several people responded to her by saying, you better start claiming that artist within because that is absolutely beautiful. When Brenda started taking her pictures and photographs, she was playing with the camera in her cell phone. She'd never been a photographer before. And she discovered she had an amazing eye for photography. And Ray comes to our drumming on Wednesdays, and he brought a bunch of beautiful Native American flutes. And we said, oh, are you a flautist? He says, no, I just play around on the flutes. But if you come on Wednesday nights, it's beautiful music. And so there's something about saying, I'm just playing around, that allows us to do something that we might not otherwise do. It allows us to bring in some of those skills that we might not otherwise attempt to bring in. So I realized that there's a value in saying, I'm just playing around, or playing around with something. And a few weeks ago when Cheryl gave her talk, she put some mind maps up on the board, or that might not be the right term for them, but she put together all of the things that she had gathered in a survey that she did among people in the congregation. And one of the questions was, what do you want more of? And the largest word was confidence. Now, I don't know what confidence people were looking for, what they were looking for confidence in. But I thought, if you just imagine yourself playing around with whatever that thing is you want more confidence in, you might discover some skills and talents you never imagined before. So take a moment. What is it you want more confidence in your life right now? Or what thing have you always wanted to try? Have you always wanted to try playing the piano or doing some art of some sort? What is that thing that you'd like to have more confidence in? And now just imagine yourself if you're just playing around with that thing. What would that look like? What could you do? Imagine playing pretend. Play pretend that I'm the best at whatever it is you want more confidence in, or that at least I'm really skilled at it. So as you let yourself imagine that, Ernest Holmes said, the person who can throw him or herself with a complete abandon into the limitless sea of receptivity, having cut loose from all apparent moorings, is the one who will always receive the greatest reward. So as you imagine yourself throwing yourself into complete abandon into the limitless sea of receptivity, being cut loose from all your moorings, isn't play one of the ways that we can do that? That's one of the moments when we're actually free. We're not thinking about what are people thinking about us. We're just allowing ourselves that complete abandon. And since I reached that place in Foundations, I was struggling way back when with what is my purpose here? And I came up with my purpose being to give God a good time. I realized as I put this together, what better way to give God a good time than to play, to have fun. That makes sense? Well, so far I've been talking about how it is that we relate to our inner self, the stuff that's going on in our mind and our soul, and that past little kid, child self that might be kind of starting to get grumpy at this time of the year. But often when we think about the holidays, sometimes we think about our stress being created by our interactions with other people. We often see family that we don't see all the rest of the year. And like I said, some of those old conflicts start to come up. We also deal with a lot more people when we're out in the world, whether it's traffic or at the mall. So sometimes those conflicts are taking place between us and other people. So how does play help in that arena, or can it? Well, last month at Wellspring, the movie night was held out there, and the movie they showed was The Last Brickmaker in America. Sidney Poitier was the lead, and his role was a 60-year-old man who had just lost his wife. He wasn't 60, I'm sorry. He was an older man who had been married 60 years and had just lost his wife after 60 years. And he was grieving her loss. And in the town was a couple who was having marital strife. I told you it all works out in an hour and a half, too. But they were having some marital issues, and they had a child that was getting sort of shared back and forth between the two parents. And at one point, the mother in that couple asked Sidney, I don't know what his name was in the movie, asked him, how did you make it 60 years happily married? What did you do? And he got this really kind of cute look on his face, and he said, well, there were times when I would go to her book study with her. And then he got this look, and he said, and it was torture. But he went. And then he said, and there were times when she would go fishing with me, and she didn't like fishing, but she would come fishing with me. And as they talked, it became clear that it wasn't like he went, why am I here? I just really don't want to be here. And she didn't grouse and whatever, be upset. They went and played in each other's arena to be together and support each other in how it is that they enjoyed life and enjoyed playing. And that was what he felt was the foundation of their happiness throughout their 60 years of marriage. And so at that point, I realized that play is important among us and between us as well. Way back in 1976, when I left home, I went from Southern California to Iowa to school. And I don't know who was in greater culture shock, Iowa when I arrived, or me when I stepped foot in Iowa. But one of the things that my Iowan roommate in college took me to see was a rodeo at Exarban, which is in Omaha, Nebraska. And she was from a hometown right on the border there near Omaha. And I had never seen a rodeo in my entire life. And this is a huge indoor building. The rodeo takes place indoor. And Dale Evans and Roy Rogers were performing. Yeah, I had no clue who they were. But I found out that they were really well known in some circles. And at the end of one of her songs, she said, "The family that parades together stays together." And I was just like, whoa, this is a public event, and she's talking about prayer. I came out of a place where you didn't mix those two things. I was just shocked. So I will never forget how she said it. I can see that cute little floofy dress that she had on. But those words have stuck with me, and I thought, okay, today I believe, yes, if you're a family that prays together, what a beautiful way to be held together. But I'm going to propose today that the family that plays together stays together. As you allow yourself to play together, that's a way to bring about a different way of interacting in your family. I was thinking, how does it sound if you get together with your family, you haven't seen them for a while, and you say, we really need to talk. Compared to, hey, let's go out and play. Or let's go play this. In some ways, play allows that healing to take place more naturally. That stuff just falls away. We move into that place that we talked about of complete abandon and receptivity. And isn't that where Ernest Holmes said we get the greatest reward, is when we can move into that place of complete abandon. Well, one of the things I realized as I put this talk together, I look back over my years of raising my son, and we did a lot of playing, but it was always from what I felt was appropriate for a child to do in play. And as my son got older, he discovered video games, not at my house. And he loves video games to this day. And I have held on to this thing, well, they're not healthy for kids and they need to do other things. And as I thought back over that, I realized that once he discovered them, he always wanted to go to his friends' houses to play. And I basically lost a lot of time with him because he wouldn't play at my house. He would go over there to play. And so I have resolved that this Christmas, I'm going to tell him, teach me how to play a video game. I've never played one in my whole life. But I want to play the way he likes to play so we can have that bond. So that's a gift to me from, I'm talking to myself up here. The other thing that I thought about in terms of play, again, is that it's for that complete abandon. It's for that fun. It's for cutting loose and enjoying life. And so sometimes, in order to do that, we have to follow the rules. We have to play by the book, because that's the way we have the most fun. But other times, and this is an ongoing debate between Brenda and Nancy, is other times we get to break the rules and we get to just have fun and do it our own way. I learned to play chess from a 6-year-old boy that I babysat for. And every time I played with him, he won. And each time he played, I got more and more confused about the rules until I finally figured out that I was playing by his rules and that I really wasn't learning how to play chess, but we had a lot of fun. And I will always remember playing chess with him and seeing him light up and having that attention from me that I'm not sure he got from his parents at that point. He was the oldest of 3 children. And so as we think about our relationship here as a center, and we think about how it is we've been talking about our relationship to Wellspring, one of the things we've been talking about is how we can come together, possibly what that might look like, whether we come fully together or whether we just come together on certain projects to bring new thought more strongly out into this community. And we've been talking about dating. And I started thinking, maybe we're too young to date. Because what we've been doing is called parallel play. And 2-year-olds do parallel play. You bring them into a room, and they play, but they're still in their own arena. They're not engaging. And so maybe we need to take a step between parallel play and dating and just get back to a play date. You know, that place where we just come together and have fun. So I'm really hoping that with the installation ceremony, which a lot of them are coming to, with our Christmas Eve ceremony, with our meditation, that we start playing, interacting, invite one of them to play with you in whatever way you can, to enjoy that time together, singing in the choir together. We need to just play and see what comes of that more naturally, I think. So do you remember what the report cards look like in kindergarten, whether your children got them or whether you got them? Think about that kid right now inside of you. What kind of report card would it get today? Would the report card say, holds resentments well? Keeps to self well? Would it say, forgives easily? Or would it say, plays well with others? Which is the one we hope that it would say. Back when I was a teenager, the Vietnam War was going on, and I had this fantasy, and I had it very well worked out, where I would give instruments to both sides, and we would pull them together, and I could see myself being dropped down by a helicopter. I'm really letting you in on some interesting fantasies of mine. But I'd be dropped down in the middle by a helicopter, and I would be conducting this huge orchestra, and they would be playing music, and the war would end. I didn't know how the war was being fought, and it wasn't two straight lines and groups of people like, you know, old-fashioned wars. So I knew, in reality, that was a huge fantasy and pretty far-fetched. And yet, in this month's National Geographic, I found this article. It's called The Christmas Truce. In December of 1914, invading German troops and the defending Allies were dug in along battle lines in Belgium and France. From sodden trenches, soldiers shot at each other across no man's land, strewn with injured and dead soldiers. But on December 24th, at points along the Western Front, Germans placed lighted trees on trench parapets, and the Allies joined them in an impromptu peace. The Christmas truce of World War I, 100 years ago this month. Yeah, isn't that neat? I never heard of this. The truce, it said, bubbled up from the ranks. Despite edicts against fraternization, the historian put a book together called Silent Night that tells the story, and his name is Stanley Weinthorpe. He said, after shouting exchanges promising, you no shoot, we no shoot, some of these previous enemies serenaded each other with carols, emerged from the trenches to shake hands and share a smoke. Many agreed to extend the peace into Christmas Day so they could meet again and bury their dead. Each side helped the other dig graves and hold memorials. At one, a Scottish chaplain led a bilingual recitation of the 23rd Psalm. Troops shared food and gifts from home, traded uniform buttons as souvenirs, and competed in soccer matches. They essentially played together. They took care of their dead, and they played together. It said no one there wanted to continue the war, but the higher brass had them get back on with what he called the grim business at hand. And yet they found out about this through diaries and letters that were sent home. And here's a picture of the two sides together on that day. So maybe it is possible to play for peace. Maybe my fantasy wasn't so far-fetched. So this holiday season, as we're surrounded by tradition, as we're looking at those ways that we're steeped in the way it's always been, let's consider bringing some illumination into that inner self. Some of us call it the child within, the kid within, our soul, that place that is really and truly filled with joy, that place that moves into complete abandon, into that limitless sea of receptivity. Let's illumine that place that loves to play. And so I've concluded after doing this that play isn't disrespectful. It's probably the most respectful thing we can do for our soul, for ourselves. So I encourage you to play together. Watch your relationships repair and heal, those within yourself with yourself, and those between you and others. Play around with whatever it is you want more confidence in, that thing you've always wanted to do. Just allow yourself to play around, play pretend, and see what happens. And play for peace. Play for peace with others, people that are different than you, across generations, maybe within your neighborhood. Randy Granger talked about that experience in his neighborhood. Maybe invite some neighbors to play or across neighborhoods. In the reading that Barbara gave us earlier, it said, "Let us come in peace with spontaneous joy." And again, to me, spontaneous joy, complete abandon, loosening ourselves from our mores, what does that more than play? So I hope you enjoy your holidays playing around. And so it is.